So the next one is Mårten Medbo. He was educated at the Kunstfak University College at the Department of Glass and Ceramics. In 2010, he was accepted as a doctoral student at crafts at HDK, Gothenburg University. And in 2016, he became Sweden's first doctor in crafts. Since 1992, he's been working as a free artist mainly with ceramics, but also with public commissions, design, assignments, and a studio production in glass. He's well renowned and is exhibited both nationally and internationally, and is represented in collections at National Museum in Stockholm, Johan Mikael Kolle Art Center in Sheboygan, and different Icelandic Museum of Applied Art and Design, and among others. Welcome so much to Mårten Medbo.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and I think so far it's been really interesting, and I hope it will continue when I start as well. Let's see if I... Okay. This was not really right. Let's see. Yes, and we have this question of what is our question, and then I started to reflect on that. There is this overall big question, I guess, that we're all dealing with as artists or craftspersons, which is, what is art in a way? We might not have it as a question, but we are giving answers to it all the time, or suggestions of what it could be. But I will try to be a little bit more specific and talk about my own question here. Even though we could have that as a kind of a backdrop to these presentations, I guess. So I will start as the others has done with saying something about my background. I started as an apprentice when I started my ceramic career, because I didn't really like school as it was. For me, so I dropped out from high school and started as an apprentice in a pottery, and I stayed there for 2.5 years. And finally I did everything that you do in a pottery. So I was part in the productions in all levels, so to speak. And for me, throwing was the most desirable part of it. So I was very happy to be able to take part in also throwing at the end. But I was not really, I was not really, I couldn't think of myself as an employee in a pottery, so I tried to develop my skills. So that's why I ended up in Konstfack, the National College of Art and Design in Sweden. And during the summers when I was in Konstfack, I worked in Gustavsberg's porcelain factory, and I was very happy to have the job. And I was thinking of myself sitting among the other throwers at the factory, throwing, taking part in the production, because to me at the time, the skill at Gustavsberg was like was like the highest level I could think of. But when I came the first day for my new job, it showed that I had to sit in the museum cafe in a glass cage, throwing for the cafe guests, and I was very disappointed. But I think one of the very skillful throwers that was up in the factory felt a little pity about me, so he came down and he guided me through the summers. And to me it was the time when I really learned something about throwing, which I at the time thought was very important. But the factory in this time, it was around maybe 90 something, and I think so, 1991 or something. It closed down. So I was in the factory at the same time at it was starting to close down. So it was a kind of sad feeling at the factory at the time, and I think that did something to me. And I will be back on that because it is very important for the question, my question. But anyhow, after school, I started to work as a potter myself, doing things like this. So this would be a piece from 1996 or something like that. But I was not capable of staying in the pottery tradition. I was not determined enough or stubborn enough to make serial production. I got bored and the production went bad, so I stopped. And the new direction was in this direction, you could say. And I also must say that the way I'm taught into this, being a ceramist, didn't bring me into reflect very much in words about what I was doing. It was an oral tradition at Konstfack by the time, and of course also in the pottery. So the question why was not a question that took place in your head like thinking with words. It was more trying to find out how to make expression that talked back, and if they talk back to you, you think they will talk also to others. So that was how I thought about my artistic practice by the time, and I did things like this, and I stopped throwing and I started make other techniques. So these both examples were casted ceramics, and this is kind of an expressive, organic way of making art. Yeah. And from the beginning, there was some kind of rudimentary utility, functional parts in the objects, but finally it was just pure form, you could say, sculptural forms. But by this time, when I did this kind of things, it was around 2003, 4 something. A couple of years earlier, I think, okay, I have found it. I could work like this. This is the way I want to work. This gets me into galleries and arenas that I want to be on. This is the way I want to work. But then I started to doubt my own expressions, and I started to see them as lacking something, as superficial in some ways. And it was very hard for me to say something about what they were about, the content. And I thought that the field wanted me to express myself around my pieces and explaining what they were all about, and I couldn't do that. So I started to think, how could I change my artistic practice so that I'm able to say something about it, to make a context for it. And I thought of that for quite a long time, and the answer was to be more narrative. So I did these kind of works instead, and this is called Schoolyard Monkeys, and it's about how you, as a child, gets into the adult world, how you are socialized into the society, more or less. And I did these different figurines shedding light on that. So they are quite cruel, a lot of these figurines, even though it's also about compassion and so on. And that made me, in a way, more, how to say, relaxed about my artistic practice when I was able to say something about what I was doing. And this is another work in the same direction, you could say. It's called Creatures, and it's from 2000 and 7, I think. But I didn't stop to do what I have done before, because I thought I could add also that this question that I had about my own art history, that was the question I brought into the PhD project, and that was what I was investigating as a PhD student. Why did I become unsure of my own artistic practice from being quite sure? That was the question I worked with during my PhD. And basically you could say I tried to understand what does it mean to be an artist, what does it mean to be a Shermist, what do a Shermist do, and how is what we do as practitioners, how is it landing in the scenes of art and craft, and how are the power structure constructed that makes us unsure of our expressions. So I continued with the kind of pieces I had done before. So this is called Harry, and it's from 2004. And I said I stopped drawing when I stopped doing pottery, but I didn't stop drawing. I trod secretly, you could say, in my studio. But I didn't show anything, which is in a way interesting, I think. But I had the aim to show something. But I was, I guess, a little bit ashamed of this knowledge I had about drawing, and also the way I trod, which was in the tradition of Gustav Sperry, that was like the most, what to say, bourgeoisie way of doing ceramics you could think of. But still I had this capacity to throw, and I really like sitting with a wheel throwing, so I couldn't stop. And I tried to cooperate it, to have it into my own artistic practice, which was very hard. And when you look at this piece, it's not really, I mean, there's a kind of skeleton throne, and then I put a lot of stuff on it. So you nearly don't see that it's trowed at all, and it's the same with this one. It's like hidden throwing in a way. So what I was thinking of was to actually get out from the, what do you say, in the light, and really showing myself as a thrower. So I started to work like this, and here I think it's, to anyone in ceramics, it's obvious that throwing is the reasonable technique to do such a thing as this. So I was really kind of content with this, and I tried to show it on the arenas I usually worked on, but I didn't have a lot of attention on those arenas, which made me once again think of my throwing as something I had to hide. But actually my things were being noticed, and they were noticed by the scene for 20th century antiques, which was in a way I was a little bit discontent with that, even though it meant that I could go on throwing, so I could spend a lot of time with my throwing, and they bought everything I did, and it disappeared like in, no, I don't want to know, this is, let they do whatever they want with my stuff. And during this time I was also a PhD student, so I had the opportunity to do works within my research, which was very interesting for me. So I did this work. I will show a little film. so this exhibition was done at Gustavsbergs Konsthall, which was kind of 100 meters from where I had been throwing in the glass cage when I was 20, as working in the summer fairs in Gustavsberg. So I did some kind of reenactment of that in an exhibition that was called Making Knowledge. And Kjell and Caroline was in the same exhibition. And to me, this piece is about a lot of things, consumption and so on, and economical systems and so, but primarily I would say it's about knowledge and the kind of view we have on knowledge in the society, and how knowledge is ignored or lifted up. So it was kind of interesting to do this as a researcher, because if you're in the academia, you're in a place with very high prestige, but when you're sitting in a glass box throwing, it's more like you are in an entertainment business or something like that, and you're not taken really serious. So it's all about that, and it's also about, I said that I might have felt a little bit ashamed of this knowledge as a ceramist trying to be in the field of contemporary ceramics. And it's a way of dealing with that as well, I think. And I think also if you start to identify something as out of fashion or obsolete or something, it's also potentially very interesting, because it could be the new, fashion thing to be in such a practice. We've seen this, I think, before. So that encouraged me to keep on this idea about throwing in my career. And actually, around 2014 or 13, I was asked to be in an exhibition in New York, and they specifically asked for those kind of objects that I have shown that was thrown. They wanted me in because of them. And I was very, very surprised, and it was an exhibition that was kind of highbrow exhibition with Ai Weiwei and Ruby Sterling and a lot of very famous artists participating, and also me with my thrown stuff. And it showed that what had happened was that the company that was interested in my things in 20th century antiques, they had taken my stuff around on a lot of fairs, and on one of those fairs, the curator had spotted my things, and the curator didn't see it as antiques, obviously, but as something else. So that convinced me even more that I should continue with the exploration of throwing as an artistic way of expressing myself. So now it's a new little film I want to show you. Okay. So when I show this work, it's like the loop. It will go on. It has no end, so to speak. It just keeps going. And I've tried to work in other ways, and this is a cooperation with Hanna Stahle, which I also lives with in an exhibition that we were invited to in outdoor exhibition. And I mean, the investigation keeps going. So I have made frames for myself that right now I have to, everything I do should be thrown. And I have to try to find the way I could make the expressions I'm looking for. And you could say, in a way, I'm looking for the same. I recognized myself when Caroline talked about what she was doing in her practice. I want my pieces to be like in a balance between beauty and ugliness, and the recognizable and the unrecognizable. I want them to be in the, what do you say, openness, so you can't really, you have to stop and reflect on them. And I also want them to be open in a specific way. I don't want you to, I don't want them to need any concepts or contexts in a way, even though you couldn't say that, I know that, but as less as possible. I want everyone being able to meet something in my work in a bodily way, you could say. But I also want them to stay. And I think of my work now, when I said earlier I couldn't say something about them, that's true, but now I could say a lot about not being able to say something about them since I'm a researcher. And I think what I'm doing, I'm working beyond the words, I would say, beyond the spoken verbal language with my work. And I think that makes sense in a way, because I express what you can express through clay. And if I could express it in some other way, clay wouldn't be the material. So the pieces right now looks a lot like this. And this is from an exhibition that I recently, it closed just weeks ago. So this is how it looks right now when I show my thrown works. It could look like this at least, but I do a lot of different things. And this is kind of gallery works, as you see. And I think I want to say something more, because I think the question that we were asked to have in mind when we thought about our question was very fruitful for me. So I will give very short answers on them. And the question was, the first one was, what is it that you are searching for in your artistic work? And besides what I've already said, I would say it's meaning. The work has to be meaningful to me in some sense, and then I think they will be meaningful for other people. That's also important. I want to express something to the outside world through my work. I think of myself as someone saying something to others. Why you are exploring the things you are exploring, and why through the use of clay and ceramics. And I think, when you think about that, I think I use clay because I started using clay a long time ago. So to me, it's a kind of language. It's like I would rather express myself in Swedish, actually. This is like working with clay with my left hand, talking in English. So I'm familiar with clay. I could express something in clay. That's why I express something in clay. I could say what I want. And the second questions are the questions that can only be answered through material-based explorations. And if so, what do these questions look like? And to be very precise, I will answer the later part of this question. My questions right now is how to make clay and wheel throwing relevant in our time and place. So, thank you.